"Get that dog off the bench, she's gone mad." The voice came sharp and frustrated, slicing through the quiet of the evening park. Yet Bella, the canine with a dark sable coat and eyes that missed nothing, did not move. Her claws scraped at the old wooden planks beneath her paws, a low growl rumbling in her throat. Officer Raymond Hale, tall, grizzled, and haunted by years of cases that left their shadows, tugged on her leash. But Bella resisted with a force he hadn't felt from her before. The park was nearly empty, a chill in the air, the last golden light of dusk stretching long across the grass. Families had gone home, laughter and footsteps fading until only the wind whispered through the trees. Yet Bella remained locked on the bench as if the earth itself had called her here. Hale bent closer, his brow furrowed. "Easy, girl," he muttered, voice quieter now, uncertain. She wasn't acting out. Bella never acted out. Every movement she made in the field was precise, driven, certain. But this was different. This was obsession. The bench itself was ordinary, weathered with splintering from seasons of rain and sun. Pigeons often perched here, and teenagers carved initials into its sides. But tonight, under Bella's unrelenting stare, it became something else, something darker. Hale crouched, running his fingers along the rough grain of the seat, tapping on its base as if to prove to himself there was nothing strange. Yet Bella's growl deepened, her hackles rising, and she pressed her nose between the slats with desperate urgency. A jogger slowed on the path, watching the scene unfold. "What's she found?" the man asked. Hale didn't answer. His chest tightened with the same dread he'd felt years ago at a crime scene, when silence carried more weight than sound. Bella pawed harder now, whining between growls, her body trembling with energy she couldn't contain. Hale gave a sharp whistle, signaling her to sit back, but she only pressed harder, scraping her claws until a dull thud echoed from beneath the bench. The sound wasn't wood, it wasn't earth, it was something hollow. Hale's breath caught. Slowly he reached into his jacket for the small flashlight he carried more from habit than necessity. With the beam cutting through the gloom, he crouched lower and angled it beneath the seat. For a moment there was only dirt and fallen leaves, but then, a faint line, a seam in the ground, unnaturally straight, like something buried and concealed. Hale's pulse quickened. Bella barked sharply, jolting the quiet air, her teeth bared toward the hidden line. "Ray, talk to me." "Is it?" The voice came from across the path. Officer Marlene Vega, younger but sharp, someone Hale trusted more than most. She jogged over, dark ponytail swinging, her hand instinctively hovering near her holster. Bella barked again, her entire body vibrating with urgency as if every second wasted was a crime of its own. Hale stood slowly, his voice steady but heavy. "She's not leaving this bench because something's under it. Something someone didn't want found." His gaze met Vega's, and for a fleeting moment the years of hardened experience cracked, revealing unease together. They knelt, pulling aside leaves and pressing fingers against the soil. It shifted to Isley, freshly disturbed, though no gardener had been here for weeks. Vega froze, her gloved hand tracing the edge of what looked like a piece of plastic tarp peeking through the dirt. Hale's stomach turned cold. Tarps meant concealment. Concealment meant something hidden that should never have been here. Bella barked once more, then sat abruptly, chest heaving, eyes locked on the ground like she had finished her part and now waited for them to face what she already knew. Silence that followed was heavier than any sound. Vega swallowed hard. "Ray, this isn't just some animal stash or trash pit, is it?" Hale didn't answer right away. His throat tightened, words caught behind the weight of certainty forming in his mind. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "No, this is human." The air seemed to shift, darker, colder, as the truth pressed in around them. The jogger, who had paused earlier, slowly backed away, sensing the gravity, while Bella stayed rooted, her eyes burning with a knowledge only she could claim. And in that moment, beneath the park bench that thousands had passed without a thought, the first breath of a murder probe stirred to life, the kind that could unravel far more than the earth beneath their knees. The first shovelful of earth came up damp and heavy, clinging to Officer Vega's gloves. The metallic scent of disturbed soil rose sharply into the night air, and every sound in the park seemed to fall away. The usual chorus of crickets had gone silent, as if even nature recoiled from what they were about to uncover. Bella sat rigid beside them, her chest rising and falling with short, sharp breaths, her ears pinned forward as if she were guarding more than just a patch of ground. Hale dug deeper with his hands, urgency replacing caution. Each scrape of his glove against the earth brought a fresh wave of dread. He had worked countless crime scenes in his 30 years, but rarely had he felt this kind of pull, the sense that they weren't just stumbling into evidence, but into a story that would change everything. His flashlight beam flickered across the soil, then caught on something slick, something pale. Hale froze. A corner of plastic sheeting emerged, dirt pressed tight against its folds. Vega inhaled sharply, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's not just trash, Ray. Someone buried something. Here, someone wanted it hidden." With a grim nod, Hale tore at the soil, revealing more of the plastic. The beam of light quivered in his hand as he pulled back the top just enough to see what lay beneath. A fragment of fabric, once white but now stained dark, clung to what could only be a sleeve, and beneath its skin, cold, lifeless, stretched taut. Vega stumbled back, covering her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with horror. God, the word broke in the air, trembling. For a long moment Hole couldn't speak. He had seen death before, murders, accidents, warlike streets in bad neighborhoods, but something about this body buried beneath. A park bench cut through every layer of hardened memory. It wasn't just the desecration of life, it was the location. A place children played, where couples walked at sunset, where families laughed on weekends. Someone had turned this quiet, public space into a grave. Bella winced suddenly, a high, keening sound that sent shivers down Hale's spine. She pawed at the ground again, as if urging them not to stop, as if the story wasn't finished. Hale pulled the top wider, and this time a hand slipped free, fingers curled stiffly, nails packed with dirt. Vega staggered to her feet, her voice breaking. "We need to call it in right now." But Hale didn't move. Something caught his eye, a glint of metal near the wrist. He leaned closer, brushing soil away, and revealed the bracelet. It was delicate, silver, with a small engraved charm shaped like a bird. His throat closed as recognition hit. He had seen this bracelet once, years ago, during a missing persons case that had haunted the department. A young woman, 19 years old, had vanished after leaving her job at a diner late one night. The case had gone cold, filed away like too many others. Her name had been Lydia Cross, and Hale had been the one who promised her grieving mother that, if there was ever a trace, he'd find it. The ground tilted beneath him as the weight of memory pressed down. His hands trembled as he whispered her name aloud, more to himself than anyone else. Vega froze when she heard it. Lydia Cross, no, Ray. That case was closed. They said she must have run away, left the state. Her words spilled fast, almost desperate, as if denial could push back the truth. But Hale only shook his head, his face pale. No, she never ran. She was here, the whole time. The reality of it cracked the silence open. A cold murder, hidden in plain sight, beneath the very benches where parents read books while their children played tag. And Bella, the dog who refused to move, had dragged it all back into the light. Vega fumbled for her radio, her voice shaking as she called for backup and a forensics team. But Hale's gaze lingered on the body, his mind racing through the names, the faces, the whispers from that year. If Lydia Cross had been here all along, then someone in this town had known. Someone had walked these paths, heard the laughter, and carried the secret of a buried girl every time they passed this bench. Bella growled again, low and warning. Her nose lifted, nostrils flaring, ears swiveling toward the tree line. Hale followed her gaze. Beyond the dim glow of the lamps, shadows shifted. He rose quickly, hand instinctively reaching for the gun at his hip. Vega caught the movement too, her eyes snapping toward the darkness. The park was empty, or it should have been. Yet a strange stillness pressed in from the trees, a silence to complete. Hale's skin prickled. Whoever had put Lydia here might not have been finished with their story. And now, standing over the grave with the truth half uncovered, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. This was no longer just discovery. It was the opening act of something far more dangerous. And Bella, steady and unflinching beside him, seemed to sense that whatever lay beneath this bench was only the beginning of a reckoning that had waited years to surface, that the soil gave way faster than expected. Vega's gloved hands tore at the loosened earth while Hale kept the beam of light steady, his jaw set tight, though the tremor in his wrist betrayed what he already feared. Bella's steady panting filled the silence, her eyes never once leaving the shallow pit forming beneath the bench. Then, with one hard tug, the top's edge came free, releasing a foul, suffocating odor that forced Vega to cover her mouth and stagger back. Hale didn't move. He had smelled this before, years ago, on cases that refused to leave his memory no matter how hard he drank them down. "God help us," Vega whispered, her voice muffled behind her sleeve. She turned her face away, her shoulders trembling, then forced herself back into the beam of the flashlight. Hale crouched lower, pulling back more of the plastic until something pale broke through the darkness. A hand, stiff and mottled, fingers curled unnaturally as if they had reached for air one last time. Bella whimpered now, no longer barking. Her growl softened into a sound that was almost mournful. Hale froze, his mind dragging through every case file he had ever handled. Every missing persons report pinned to corkboards back at the station. One face lingered above the rest, a girl with auburn hair and a laugh that had haunted the whole town when she vanished 2 months ago. He didn't dare speak her name, not yet, not until the coroner confirmed. But the weight pressing into his chest told him this wasn't random, this wasn't forgotten. Someone had placed her here, in a park filled with children, laughter, and picnics, like a sick reminder hiding in plain sight. Vega forced her breathing steady and crouched again, eyes hardening against the sting of what they had uncovered. "This isn't a dump site," she said firmly. "Whoever did this wanted her found. That's why Bella wouldn't leave." Her words clung to the night air, sharp and chilling. Hale turned to her, the beam of light catching the hard set of his face. He knew she was right. He knew it in the same way he knew Bella's instincts never failed. The jogger had long fled, leaving the path eerily empty, but Hale's gut told him someone could be watching. He scanned the tree line, every shadow stretching longer in the dim glow of the street lamps. For a moment, he thought he saw movement, a flicker like someone slipping deeper into the dark. He tightened his grip on Bella's leash, his voice low. "We're not alone out here." Vega's hand hovered near her sidearm, her jaw clenched as she rose to her feet. "You think they're still here?" she asked. Hale didn't answer. Instead, he pressed his ear to the silence, listening for the crunch of leaves, the snap of a branch, anything to confirm what his instincts screamed. Nothing came, only the distant hum of traffic far beyond the park. But the unease didn't fade, it thickened. Bella suddenly stiffened, ears pricked, head swiveling toward the same shadowed stretch Hale had been watching. She gave a single bark, sharp and explosive, before falling silent again, her body poised like an arrow drawn taut. Hale's throat tightened. Whoever had done this hadn't just buried the body and disappeared. They were still tied to this place, tethered by some reason that defied sense. And now, thanks to Bella, the secret was no longer theirs to keep. Vega pulled her radio, her voice steady though her fingers shook. "Dispatch, this is Officer Vega. We need units at Lincoln Park, northeast, bench, immediately. Possible homicide scene, secure perimeter." Static crackled back, confirming, but Hale's eyes stayed locked on the dark edge of the park. The longer he looked, the more certain he became that they weren't merely standing at a crime scene, they were standing inside a message. The tarp shifted slightly in the breeze, revealing more of the figure below. Hale forced himself to look, even as his stomach churned. The girl's wrist bore a bracelet, silver with a tiny bird charm. He remembered seeing it once, dangling in a photograph taken at her school dance. His chest clenched with the kind of ache that years on the force couldn't numb. "It's her," he murmured, his voice cracking low, meant only for Vega's ears. Her eyes widened, her face paling, but she didn't speak. There was nothing to say that could soften the truth. Above them, the wind picked up, leaves scattering across the path in a restless shuffle, as though the park itself recoiled at what lay beneath its heart. Bella gave another low whine and pressed against Hale's leg, grounding him in a way words could not. He placed a hand gently on her head, eyes still fixed on the shadows. "Whoever put her here," he said, his voice carrying the weight of both fury and grief. "They wanted us to find her. But why now?" The question hung unanswered, twisting in the chill air. And as sirens began to echo faintly in the distance, growing nearer with each second, the truth pressed harder against them. This was only the beginning. The body under the bench was not just a victim. It was a doorway into something darker, a thread leading to a story no one in the town was prepared to unravel. Hale's hand trembled as he brushed away the last layer of loose soil, the beam of his flashlight quivering across the ground. The blue top stretched wider than he had first imagined, its edges buried deep, pressed tight as though someone had meant for it to remain untouched forever. Bella's growl had quieted into a restless whimper, her body leaning against the bench, her eyes refusing to break away. The park that had once felt ordinary now loomed oppressive, the shadows of the trees stretching long like fingers pointing toward them. Hale swallowed hard, his throat dry, and looked to Vega, whose jaw was clenched tight but whose eyes betrayed the same fear running in his veins. With gloved hands, Vega tugged at the corner of the top, the soil crumbling away to reveal a shape beneath. At first, it was just the suggestion of form, but as she cleared more, the outline became undeniable. A body, the scent of damp earth mingled with something heavier, a decay that clung to the night air and wrapped around them like a warning. Hale felt his stomach twist. No matter how many years he wore the badge, no matter how many scenes he walked into, that first recognition never got easier. The stillness of death always hit with the weight of finality, and this one was no different. "Call it in," Haley said quietly, his voice hoarse. But even as he spoke, his eyes lingered on the details, the way the top was knotted, the strange precision with which it had been folded over the body, the depth of the soil. It wasn't the hurried work of panic, it was deliberate, calculated. Someone had taken their time to ensure this grave would never be disturbed, and yet Bella had found it, as if guided by something deeper than scent. Vega pulled out her radio, her voice steady, professional, announcing the discovery and requesting immediate backup. Yet her other hand trembled against her thigh. When she finished, she glanced at Hale, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "Do you ever get the feeling something's watching you?" Hale turned his head slowly, scanning the tree line. The branches shifted with the breeze, but behind them the park seemed to hold its breath. A subtle crackle of leaves echoed in the distance, too sharp, too deliberate to be mere wind. Bella stiffened, her head snapping up, ears pricked forward, a growl forming deep in her chest. Hale felt the hair rise on the back of his neck. "Stay sharp," he whispered, moving closer to the bench, one hand hovering near his sidearm. He had been in enough situations to know when unseen eyes tracked him, and now, standing over a body that someone had buried with care, he felt certain the killer hadn't gone far. The distant wail of approaching sirens pierced the silence, faint but growing louder. Relief should have come with the sound of backup, but instead Hale felt the tension thicken. Whoever had done this now knew the secret had been unearthed. There was no telling how desperate they might become. Vega's flashlight caught on something. Near the body, a glint half buried in dirt, a small pendant on a broken chain. She picked it up carefully, her gloved fingers brushing off the soil to reveal a locket, old and tarnished. When she flipped it open, a photograph looked back at them, a young woman smiling with bright, unguarded eyes. The picture was creased, worn as though carried often. Vega's breath caught. This wasn't just disposal, she murmured. This was personal. Hale studied the photo, a dull ache pressing against his chest. He'd seen killers who erased their victims, stripping them of identity, turning them into nothing more than evidence. But this was different. Whoever had done this couldn't quite let go, couldn't bury everything. The locket was both a confession and a mistake, and mistakes meant trails to follow. Bella barked suddenly, her body jerking toward the far side of the path, teeth bared, a snarl ripping through the night. Hale swung his flashlight just in time to catch the flash of movement, someone darting between trees. Too quick for a clear look, instinct roared through him. Vega, stay with the body, he barked, breaking into a sprint, Bella lunging at his side. The chase was a blur of branches whipping against his arms and the thud of boots on soil. Bella's barks echoed like war drums, her body pulling the leash taut, guiding him toward the fleeing shadow. Hale's lungs burned, but adrenaline pushed him harder. Ahead, he caught another glimpse, the glint of a jacket, the twist of a head glancing back. Whoever it was, they knew the terrain, weaving between trees with desperate precision. But Bella was relentless. She surged forward, dragging Hale faster than he thought possible, her growls slicing through the dark like blades. The figure stumbled once, catching themselves, and Haley saw enough to know this wasn't just some vagrant or passerby. This was the kind of run born of guilt, the kind of run only the guilty ever made. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the figure vanished into the thicket, the sound of retreat swallowed by silence. Bella skidded to a halt, barking furiously at the brush, her nose working furiously, but the trail seemed to dissolve into the night air. Hale stood panting, every nerve on fire, staring into the dark as though it might answer him. When he finally returned to the bench, Vega's face was pale, her grip on the locket tight. The body remained as it was, but the presence of the fleeing shadow had changed everything. This was no longer a discovery. This was a hunt, and now the park itself seemed alive with secrets, each tree and shadow whispering that the killer was closer than they had ever imagined. Hale stood over the bench, his breath still uneven, the forest around him silent again except for Bella's steady panting. The officers who had arrived circled the scene with quiet efficiency, yet their voices carried a weight of unease, each man and woman aware that the killer had slipped through the same shadows they now guarded. Vega knelt by the locket, her thumb brushing its worn surface, her face pale but composed. She looked up at Hale, her eyes holding the question neither dared to ask aloud. How close had they come to catching the one who had done this? Bella pressed against Hale's leg, her body trembling not from fear but from instinct, unfulfilled. She had led them here, unearthed what no one was meant to find, and still she strained toward the darkness as though the forest itself whispered of unfinished business. Hale crouched beside her, resting a weathered hand on her neck. "You did enough, girl," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was convincing her or himself. The body was lifted gently from the soil, carried with care beneath the stark wash of floodlights. For the first time since the discovery, the bench looked bare, stripped of its secret, though the earth beneath would never again feel like ordinary ground. The air was thick with the smell of turned soil and the heavier truth it carried. Haley knew the investigation would stretch on, filled with reports, suspects, and leads. But the moment belonged not to the chase nor the paperwork, it belonged to the silence that came after. When everyone finally realized the weight of what had been hidden here, as the vehicles rumbled away, Hale lingered, staring at the hollow in the earth and the shadows that surrounded it. The locket's photograph still haunted him, the smile of a life once full, now reduced to evidence. He thought of Bella, who refused to leave, who had fought him with every ounce of her strength until the truth was unearthed. It wasn't just instinct, he realized. It was loyalty, the kind that refuses to let the forgotten remain buried. When Hole finally rose to leave, Bella still sat before the bench, her gaze fixed and unblinking, as though standing guard over what had been revealed. In that moment, she was more than a dog, more than a partner. She was a sentinel of truth, unyielding against silence. And though the park would fill again with laughter and footsteps in days to come, this ground would never be the same. Beneath its soil, a story had been forced into light, and Bella had made sure it would not be ignored.